Hi, everybody. My name is Ted McGreer. I own Ted's Shoe and Sport, kind of a run walk store here on Main Street in beautiful downtown Keene, New Hampshire. This weekend marks our 25th anniversary of the store, so we're kind of excited about that. But I've been doing this since 1992. I've been in retail since the 80s, and ski, bike, triathlon business for a long time. Was an athlete myself, and so I was a boot fitter for the U.S. ski team for a while, and so I've really worked with lots of athletes on lots of different levels. And now probably almost half our business are medical referrals, where we're working with people who have significant needs for solution footwear, and it's really the same process for those folks as it is an ultra runner. So I love what I do. I love getting out of bed and doing this every single day, and living in the community and being able to give back and put on races and just endorse people being active is just what I dream about. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. You guys have such a good group of people, that are hardcore, well, I should say hardcore, but like hardcore loyal to you in terms of, shoes, but also to the little running community that you have built over there. So it's cool to see every time you guys are posting, the nighttime run videos, or, when you're doing, is it this weekend that you guys are doing the inflatable dinosaur
Oh,
run?
the inflatable race is it's like June 21st. It's
Okay.
for the 30th anniversary of Jumanji. So
Oh,
we're
that's right.
we're kind of replicating the Stampede. And I thought we'd get like 15 or 20 people to sign up and run down Main Street in these T-Rex costumes, but we've already got like 40 pre-registered. So it's going to be awesome. Yeah, it's only
That's
400 meters. So it's like
amazing. All
just a
right, I'm
sprint.
definitely going to have to be there for that, because that is, when I saw that go out on social media, I was like, this is the perfect way to do this. Like, so many people have those things.
Yeah,
So many people would do it, would just, run down Main Street. And it's so appropriate for the fact that part of that movie was filmed right in downtown Keene, right around the corner from your shop, actually. So, yeah.
that's so fun.
So
Yeah.
last time you were here, we kind of covered all our bases, but like I talked about earlier before we started recording, that was back in the fall of 2021. So it's been a while. And my assumption is that not much has changed per se in the world of footwear, but I think one of the questions that people have, or let's just say new runners, whether that's they're new to actual like road running or whether they're new to trails and ultras, is like how to buy the right shoes. So I guess maybe my question is, what are the biggest mistakes that people make when they're buying running shoes? Or maybe if there's a specific something that's trail related or ultra related, like what are some of those things people should be doing or not doing?
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question. And with the world at our fingertips and having access to so much product and so much information, it's easy to get caught up in shoe reviews. And many of us kind of have our loyal brand, right, or our shoe. And what's challenging with that is that once that shoe gets updated for next year, they may change it. They may ruin it. But we just think, well, we're a 10 and a half. That's our shoe. That's our model. And we order another pair and we wonder why our feet are killing us or we have blisters. So you have to really be careful of a couple things. One is updated models, because designers from all of these companies, even since when we did this last podcast, Megan, Ultra, for example, has a whole bunch of new designers on their team who came from other companies. And so their mindset is shifting quite a lot, actually. I mean, here's a zero drop brand that is doing a whole bunch of 4 mil drop shoes now, right? We never thought we'd see that day happen. So, and for those of you who don't understand, that 4 millimeter drop is the heel to toe ratio. So your heel is 4 millimeters higher than the ball of your foot. It just kind of aids in rolling off the toe and, helps reduce the strain on your Achilles or your calf. So 4 millimeters is basically 2/4. It's not a lot, but there's now talk about dynamic drop, so that when you compress the shoe, is 4 millimeters actually zero, because you're actually putting weight into the midsole and the foam. So, but anyway, some of the biggest mistakes that people can make is buying a running shoe the same size as their street shoe size. And if you're running an ultra, think about the size of your feet prior to the race and the size of your feet at the end of that race. The amount of expansion and splay and elongation and swelling is remarkable. I mean, so many of you guys are running Tahoe 200. Think about the shape of your feet at the end of that race. So that shoe has to accommodate splay. It has to accommodate locking your heel in place. But gosh, this foot shape kind of discussion with Topo and Ultra and a lot of brands that are getting roomier in the forefoot is brilliant. I mean, it's changed the game for ultra running. And I'm just a huge fan of, really before you go buy a pair of shoes, take your socks off, look down at your feet, look at the shape of your feet. If your first three toes are the same length, you cannot get a shoe that's pointy. It'll never fit. You have to buy a size longer to get it to be wide enough. And then you've got returns and you got to ship it back and forth. It's a total pain. I think one of the things that I really take pride in is probably a dozen times a year, we have different brands come into the store and we do demo runs. So these brands have demo fleets of shoes, which is really, really helpful to go run in them and test them. Even if it's a new brand that you've never tried before, I really encourage people to just try what's out there. So leverage the power of the community in your local running stores, because if they're doing it right, they're having demo runs. And I think that's a really good way to kind of reshift your thinking. If you've had a shoe and then they changed it and maybe it's not working for you anymore, try that to start. Mm-hmm. But also, you want to do business with a company or a website or a run store who has a liberal return policy, right? Because you just don't know until you get out there. They may feel great in the store, but what do you do? So I think all those little kind of metrics matter.
One of the things I think and maybe I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure I did not come to this on my own. But one of the things I think you mentioned in our last conversation was about the time of day that you go and shop for shoes, for running shoes, and kind of, tying in what you said about after a run or looking at your foot and trying to determine what size. It's better to go later in the day after you've spent some time. Maybe you've already gone for your run, maybe you've done some stuff, and then go shoe shopping so that your feet maybe are a little bit more, splayed out, or they are just a touch swollen, to kind of replicate what you're actually going to look like and feel like when you actually put that shoe on.
Yep, you're hired. You nailed it. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry, Thomas, I'm coming for your job.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're running and you're this is what you're doing, I mean, yeah, absolutely come in after you've run, because you're going to have a whole different experience for sure. I think too, and we'll probably get to this, I don't want to go too fast, but I think the other thing that we have to ask ourselves as it relates to selecting a new shoe, or knowing that your old ones are dead and it's time to kind of upgrade your shoes, or maybe you're training for a new event and you want to have some gear before that. But I think you have to ask yourself, what experience do you want to feel under your feet? Because this whole conversation is totally, the companies have changed the game as far as the experience you want to feel. Do you want something light and nimble and close to the ground so you're connected? Do you have bad knees and bad hips and feel like you need more max cushion? Do you need to kind of roll off your toe because you have a big toe joint issue? So, some of these rocker shoes will help that for ascents and descents. So you really have to kind of ask yourself what your body prefers and what you can tolerate. That experience is totally changing the game.
I think you bring up a good point. But also, I've noticed over the last couple of years that sometimes people have a really hard time knowing what they want or knowing what they need. They're sort of like, I need a running shoe, but I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know if I want this or that, or if I can go to zero drop. So while I think that's really good, like it's a great idea, I don't know that everybody has that ability. Like, I work with a lot of people who are kind of so disconnected from their bodies that they literally walk into the running store and they hand themselves over to the sales associate. And, I have no problem doing that when I go into your store, but some other stores I've been to, I've been like, oh, I don't know that this is necessarily the right choice for me.
No, and I think the one thing I've been saying for, the last 10 years or so is that all footwear models now, there's virtually no stitching on the uppers of these shoes. And when we think about seamless uppers, it's essentially a larger sock, right? And so most of these shoes are pretty much broken in right out of the box. So when you go try 2 or 3 options on, first of all, take some time to run around the store and really think about those proprioceptors, how your brain reacts to your feet. But the shoe that you should select is the one that feels the best, that right out of the box. Really, we don't have to create this rocket science. Oh, they're going to get better, they're going to widen. No, they should feel so good the minute you put them on. That's just, I'm a huge fan of that.
Yeah, that's so now I have a sidestep question for you, because this is actually a conversation that a few of my clients and I have been having inside my coaching membership. I love my ultras. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with ultras right now, because to your earlier point, they used to have a really wide, very generous toe box, and over the last couple of years, they've really narrowed it down. So if that is the case, if somebody has, well, I guess this is probably a two-part question. If someone has really loved ultras and they are like me and have noticed that it started to get more and more narrow, is there another brand that you might consider sending them to check out? Something that might like have the space that they're looking for?
Yeah, there's becoming a lot more brands that are doing that foot shape, kind of that oblique squared off toe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Topo is Tony Post, who started this little company in Boston. They've really grown in leaps and bounds. And he was the inventor of the five finger shoes, the Vibram
Mm-hmm.
five finger shoes. So he's all about forefoot splay as well, but with a really snug fitting heel and midfoot wrap. So we're finally starting to see companies come out with wide widths, even though they have a wider toe box. So,
Mm.
again, for people with wide feet or really tall feet, there's a difference between your foot being wide right to left and being really tall. And so we can't measure the top of your foot to the ground, right? And so if you have a high instep or steep instep, you need more material to wrap over the top of your foot, right? Otherwise, the tongue is going to be so far apart, and the lace distribution, the eyelets are so far apart, you never get your foot in the shoe. And so inevitably you have an 8.5 wide and you're buying a 10.5 medium, right? Just to try to cram your feet in. Not a great recipe. So being able to get a true width doesn't necessarily mean that companies are widening them right to left, but they're making them deeper. And
Mm.
having that depth inside helps for expansion, right? It's kind of cheating the system, because when they open up new molds to make a true wide width, it costs like $600,000 to make one
Yeah.
mold for one shoe. These companies have to be a little careful of how they execute that, but true wides are hard to find, and we're starting to finally see that happening. Ultra is actually doing it in their Lone Peak. Topo is doing it in a couple race shoes, as well as the shoe called the Ultra Venture, which is just a great hybrid shoe. So if you want that kind of really nice round toe with plenty of room to display, but then lock in your heel, I would say those are probably the two premier brands still right now.
So what you described with in terms of, I equate it to volume.
Yes.
The word I use is volume when it comes to the height of your foot. That's my current problem with my Olympus sixes, is that not only is there not a ton of volume there, but now they've also shortened up the laces. So when I go to lace mine up and then I do that like crossover lacing technique, I have maybe this much. I should have brought my shoes up. I have like this much extra lace to tie the tiniest of bows to get it in there. Whereas before I could do even double or triple knot with those. So it's like, if it's not one thing, it's another. It's just kind of funny to me, to watch from version to version to version, the shifts and the changes. I mean, my shoe rack downstairs is like a history.
Yes.
Like
I
you
love
can,
it. Yeah.
see the previous versions of those shoes. So then my next question, and one of the strategies that I was actually gonna run by you, so I'll just ask you here. So if I can't really get what I'm looking for in a women's 8.5 Olympus, what if I went to the men's version? Would that help me out any in terms of width and depth or volume?
It would in the forefoot. The problem with doing that, though, Megan, is that the heel cup in a men's shoe is wider. So you might be super happy in the toes and the instep volume, but you'd have to just try it on to make sure you feel like you're locked down in the back. Because I know
Mm,
that you use that runner's lace,
yeah,
you might kind of feel like you're sliding side to side in that heel cup a little bit. So
interesting.
yeah, you've got to have a pretty wide heel to be able to switch from a women's shoe to a men's, for
Okay,
sure. Yeah.
okay. I may
The
I may
interesting
just
thing
try
though,
that on the next time I'm over there.
yeah, no, and it's usually a size and a half difference. So a
Mhm.
7 men's is a women's 8.5, but
Okay.
I don't actually use that as a scale anymore. I use the European size. So if your ultras are, let's say they're 38s, you'd go to a men's 38, which could be like a 7.5. So as long as the European size matches, that's a volume measurement,
Hmm.
which is important. The one thing I wanted to share though with you and the listeners is that every single brand out there, whether it's Solomon or On or lots of these brands that are deeply rooted into the trail running community. their product managers and their developers and designers work with the elite athletes, right? And they put all these different shoes on the elite athletes. They probably spend $10,000 per pair to do these one-offs and let these elite athletes test them and do 100-mile, weeks and days and so forth. And then they taper down their data that they get from these elite athletes to make, the general public's options, right? And so Solomon has this S Lab series of shoes, and they're elite athletes running these things, test them, they develop them. They're like $285. And they're European fit. They're like narrow. They don't fit a ton of feet as well as they could. And they're also just wildly overpriced. But I'm not crapping on Solomon, but what I am going to say is that we're starting to see a shift with product developers and design where that they're not actually taking so much data from elite athletes anymore. And they're actually starting with people like us, which I think is awesome. And starting to develop shoes for run-of-the-mill people and not necessarily just starting with the elites. So
Yeah.
the more that happens, the more options we're going to see change, I think, to fit more feet.
That's great because I feel like the model that you described from sort of like the top down is good in certain respects, but it also negates this whole subpopulation, like you said, of just like the everyday athlete who isn't doing that much mileage or whose feet aren't as conditioned to maybe wear a shoe that's got less cushioning or less structure or so much, so I do think it's good that they're starting. I remember you asking me a couple, like maybe last year or something, like the last round of Olympuses I had, you were like, let me know what you think of these because I'm going to talk to my rep and, give him some feedback. So it's encouraging to know that they're actually listening for that type of feedback from us normal people.
Yes. Did my little hydraulic shoe stretchers help widen that
Yes,
shoe? Yeah, good.
they did. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still narrow. So like it's still to the point where after a long run, I actually am starting to develop the slightest little bit of rubbing on the inside of my big toe because my foot, where the junction between the actual insole and where the fabric starts to come up on the side, there's some rubbing happening there. And it's largely because of foot swelling as I get deeper into the run. So I'm going to experiment with, normally I don't have to tape my feet, like no KT tape, no Lugo tape or whatever, but I am going to experiment next time with just doing some tape right there to see if that helps. But that has been my issue. It's just when you stretch them, they definitely got better, but it's just not the 5. The 5 is like my unicorn shoe. If we could go back to the 5, that would be great.
When I get off this podcast with you, I'm calling my rep at Ultra and we're going to let them have it. So, but for those of you who do have, in Megan, your situation is real, and you're not running in like an over the counter footbed or super feet or a insole. And a lot of people do love having some contour under their feet for long days, but, I'm not going to say I endorse it or don't endorse it. It's really a personal preference thing. If people are dealing with some pressure distribution, maybe you have a hot spot under your fifth toe or under the fifth metatarsal or your big toe, sometimes a footbed can help spread the pressure more evenly.
Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about footbeds in certain cases is that you can get different thicknesses. So if you went to a 1 millimeter thick footbed and the factory insole that you take out of your Ultras is 5 millimeters thick, well, you're dropping the foot inside the shoe and you create much more volume, right? So even if you don't use or run in an orthotic or a custom footbed or an over-the-counter footbed, just even taking the foam sock liner out and putting a thinner one in can totally change the way your feet feel up in the toe box. So volume shift, big time.
I did not know that. I mean, I was obviously aware of people swapping them out for orthotics or for, more support or less support, but I wasn't even aware that it would help from a volume perspective. So maybe that's something that I tried next time around too.
Well, just for fun, if you took your Olympus 6s and you pull one of the sock liners out and pop your foot in, you're going to clearly have a lot more room, right? So if you split the difference between that and have something kind of thin, even like at Walmart, they have those or Walgreens, they have those odor eaters, really just a thin little pad. It's really that, you're not going to get true arch support, and not a lot of people necessarily ask for it. But if your feet are strong enough, which yours are, you can put anything in your shoe.
So does that mean that little foam insert that comes standard in the shoes is doing nothing?
It's lining your sock from sitting on the threads underneath. right? It's a sock liner. So its job is to pull some moisture off your sock and try to keep your feet dry, but also just line your sock. So yeah, it's not really have any contour capabilities or arch support. There's really not anything in those foam liners at all. So
That's good to know.
and
I think
sometimes there doesn't need to be, right? I mean, yeah, if you're not having foot issues or foot fatigue or plantar fasciitis or pressure point stuff, you don't necessarily need an orthotic in your shoe. So
yeah.
it's
I
okay.
think I just automatically assumed that um that insert was doing something more than just protecting my foot from the, like, it was adding to the overall sole of the shoe, rather than just being a sort of like a barrier, a protective layer.
Well, and it's interesting. So if you do take the inner sole out, the factory insole out of your shoe, and you take your thumb and forefinger and you just compress it, like 1 pound of pressure, right? Not even, I don't even know, maybe less than a pound of pressure can flatten it. So it doesn't really have any additional shock absorption characteristics. So when you buy a gel insert, it can't be thicker than what you're taking out because it's going to make the shoe too tight. And you can do the same thing with a gel insert, right? So anything that you put in will obviously feel better, but gel inserts aren't necessarily going to give you any extra cushioning either. While an egg might not break if you drop an egg on it, I think when you think about how much impact force, the load that your foot and your body will strike the ground. I mean, running in the woods, if you have kind of a short stride, it might be 3 times your body weight, right? If you're on the road, it might be 5 times your body weight. So, do the simple math. That's a lot of force on your foot. And if your shoes get to that point where they're a year and a half old, that foam has seen better days.
I guess that's probably this is a good time to kind of transition into everyone's favorite question, which is what's the shelf life? What's the life of my shoes? Like, when should I replace them?
Yep. I think one of the things that matters a lot is when companies put shoes on a diet, they take a lot of things out of the shoe and the shoes just don't last as long. And you're adding more air into the foam that's underneath your feet. And really, don't turn your shoe upside down and look at the tread and say, my shoes are toast, right? It's really not the tread that wears out first, nor is it the upper. It's the midsole. So the foam that's underneath your feet, not the sock liner, but that midsole foam is really compressing, right? And so if you park your car in your garage for a year, your tires are going to get flat spots, right? That rubber it's going to happen. So even not running in those shoes, that air, that foam, that really squishy stuff starts to dry out after a while. So, if I have shoes that are here in the store for 2 years, I don't feel good about selling them because the foam starts to turn a different color. I mean, it's kind of scary, but so really the life of the shoe, if the shoe is under 9 ounces, it's probably 350 miles, but so much of this depends on your impact. Like, are you a heavy runner? Are you light? Are you efficient? Are you nimble? But really 300 to 600 miles is probably the life of most of these shoes. The beefier the shoe, the more life you might get. But again, if it's got an EVA midsole, that foam does compress after about 6 to 8 months.
Yep. I think people, depending on who they are, how much they're running, and this issue is twofold, because running shoes are, and everything is getting more expensive, but because they are expensive, I think people are trying to really stretch every last little ounce of life out of them. And some people, and I'm guilty of this too, have been using them long past their, expiration date. And so then you start to get people who are having foot, knee, ankle, hip, back, issues because they're wearing those shoes well past their expiration date, like I said. So that's one of the ways that you can kind of, at least that's been my experience.
Megan, for you, I mean, what your shoes feel like when they're toast, right? So you get to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, it's time, right? And for you, that might be 700 miles, right? Who knows what the number is? I hate to put a mileage number on a shoe because it's so different for all of us. The same way I feel so strongly about shoe reviews. I will never, ever do a shoe review in my store, on YouTube, any of that stuff, because it just is only as good as the reviewer's feet. And your feet are not the same as his feet or her feet. Just they're not. Yeah, I struggle with that. But you know what? I've got some kind of fun little props here. So these are these little molds that I made, Megan. So this is the foot non-weighted. This is a women's 8. And this is the exact same foot with weight. So in this kind of foam pit, you can see that the foot almost elongates close to a half an inch, right? Under full weight. So when you try shoes on, obviously, it's probably not a bad idea to go to a decent run shop that you trust where they can measure your feet. But I would tell you that it's still so important, that old fashioned thumbnail in front of your toe, right? Think about the ups and the downs and the concave and the off camber stuff that you guys are all running. You've got to have some space in the toes. I mean, if it's a road shoe and you're just running flats, or your training runs are just flat, then maybe you don't need to go as long. But really, I think that's so important. And if the minute you put that shoe on, you feel some slipping in the heel, don't buy it. Just don't buy it. You got to be locked down in the back of that shoe, locked right down. But yeah, I mean, the elongation is ridiculous, right? I mean, so not all feet elongate like this, but it's just a function of impact force and your foot splaying. And that's why these really nice round shoes are making such an inroad in trail. So here's the Ultra Lone Peak, right? And you can see that kind of oblique shaped toe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Hoka Speed Goat. So this is like the gold standard. Everybody loves the Speed Goat, but look at the difference in shape, right? I mean, if you have a pointy foot, then this is great. But if you got a square foot, like most people, this is going to be way better, right? So again, I'm not poo-pooing the Speed Goat. It's an amazing shoe. It's totally changed the game for ultra running. But I just think that the minute you put shoes on, don't overthink it. Just I guess that's the other thing. Just don't overthink it. And the shoe should feel really natural and really comfy.
I think
it's probably a totally different size than your street shoe size. It probably is. Yeah.
The other thing I hear a lot from people is they don't want to be a pain when they go to the running store, and they don't want to make the sales associate run back and get 17 different things to try on. So people often feel bad about it, but I'm always encouraging them, like, if you try one on and it really doesn't fit well, you got to try something else. Like, don't just buy it because you feel bad they did their job and like got you the shoe. Like, so, try on as many as you need and walk around in them and test them out.
And that's what we sign up for in this business, right? I mean, we can't put on community events and races and have run clubs and stuff if we don't have customers. And if we're not working with people and being patient with them, then we shouldn't be in this business. So, your run store, wherever you are, if they're not willing to do that, then yeah, I get it. But really, that's part of what we sign up for. You have to just be patient with people. And I think, yeah, it's especially when your model has changed and you're like, now what do I do? You got to start fresh. And sometimes that really does come down to return policies and having a chance to try stuff. And that's why I also come back to that demo run option. So if you go to a race and there's a company there, hop on a pair of shoes, just take them for a half mile. Just do what you think.
Are there any new interesting either shoes or features of shoes or things that have come out recently that you're kind of loving that you think people should know about?
We're seeing this continuation of max cushion, and it's kind of wild to me because we've seen this thing come on for 10 years, right? These really jacked up shoes that are rockered and help kind of roll your foot forward like a bicycle wheel. While it certainly does take some pressure off your quads for descending and helps people recover with a lot less DOMs, I keep thinking that pendulum is going to shift back to more minimalism shoes again, and we're just not seeing that, Megan. We're seeing continuations. Like Topo is coming out with their version of the Speed Goat this summer in June, and it's almost 2 inches of foam under the foot, right? But you're down inside the shoe, so you're not on top of 2 inches. You're not going to roll your ankle. But we're seeing more widths being offered by a lot more brands, which I think is awesome. And we're seeing a lot more companies kind of squaring off the forefoot because Ultra and Topo and even what's his name's brand? Oh gosh, I can't believe I can't remember. Normal shoes, really nice round toe boxes. So again, though, I don't think that you need to spend $200 on a trail shoe. I mean, the most expensive trail running shoe in our store, I think, is the Olympus 6 at $170. The other good news is most of these shoes are all being made in Vietnam. And so the tariffs are not going to be affecting prices of these shoes, thankfully. We don't really have a lot of brands anymore making shoes in China. So that's an important thing to note. So yeah, I wish I could say that we're seeing this whole crazy new shift in technology and stuff, but I do think that foams are getting better, outsoles are getting better. Like Vibram is, their Mega Grip outsole is just unbelievable. Wet Rocks, I mean, it's just such really good stuff. So more and more companies are sourcing Vibram rubber for their shoes. But yeah, no, I think less is more sometimes, right?
I also think if, they're trying to reinvent the wheel every year and try and make it one up themselves and make it new and splashy, it fatigues us as buyers too, because we can't keep up. We don't know where to go to get the thing that we have been relying on. And if they keep tweaking things to the
Right.
point of no return, then it becomes, it eats away at their business. That's my opinion. I
Totally
just
does.
feel like, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And the one thing that drives me as a retailer crazy is, when I see and I curate my inventory a year in advance. We've already seen Olympus 7. Haven't had to try it on yet, but we've seen it, which is kind of cool.
What does it look like? What does it look like?
Subtle change. Yeah, they've been
Oh
missing it too
no.
much. We'll see. I mean, you'll be the first to have it. But
Are they taking out that little heel thing that is the bane of my existence? That ridge in the
I
heel?
can't remember. I'm going to find out. I'll tell you later
Okay.
today. I'll find out. But I think, goodness, where was I going? Shoot, I lost it.
I'm sorry. I detracted you by getting excited that because you're curating your inventory a year
Oh,
in advance.
yes, thank you. So the thing that drives me nuts as a retailer is the Olympus 7, for example. Just a workhorse shoe, right? And it's a training shoe. It's not a race shoe. It's probably a 12-ounce shoe. It's a beefy monster truck of a trail running shoe. They're going to offer it in 9 colors. Like, really. And so we're going to pick maybe the best 2 colors and bringing it in, but we have to have from 6.5 to 11. And maybe if it's a really good color, couple, maybe 2 or 3 8s, 8.5s, 9s. So, you've got to have 15 pairs for one color in the back room. And then you bring in a second color, maybe 7 to 10 in individual sticks. And then maybe there's a really fun pop color that you just go 7.5, 8.5, 9, 10. So you have 3 colors on the wall. They make 9 colors in the shoe. And people come in and they're like, does it come in another color? Yes, it comes in 9, but we picked what we think are the best 3. And I go through this with staff and we're like, what do you guys think? Like, not what you would wear, but what are our customers going to like? And inevitably it's this color game, and these companies are just making too many colors. And I just would beg people to say, don't let color skew the way the shoe feels. And that really does get in the way sometimes. People just want this certain look, and they're willing to sacrifice fit for color. And that's a real issue.
But you will, like, if someone went to your store and tried on that Olympus and they liked that fit, but they didn't like the color, you would order them the different color.
Absolutely. Totally. Yeah. But it's crazy because you've got 60 pairs in the back room for one model, and then you have to special order one because the color isn't flowing. But that's the challenge with these colors. These designers got to kind of calm down.
That's crazy. That's crazy that you would go through the effort of making 9 different colors.
Yeah. And you see some of the colors and you're like, really? They approved like a solid orange?
That's what I was going to say. Some of the colors of recent, iterances, I've been questioning them. Like,
Right.
who's the designer here that's throwing these colors out?
Well, and it's wild because there's actually kind of an upper pyramid of people in fashion called colorists, and for apparel and footwear, and basically this upper pyramid of colorists dictate the colors for all the seasons. And so every brand comes out with kind of a shade of the same thing each year, which is wild, where people are like, well, gray's the new black, or pink's the new, whatever that is, right? But that's where that starts from.
That's crazy. I mean, there's like most things, right? There's so many deeper layers to this that we as consumers have no insight into. So that's why I'm always interested to talk to you, because I get sort of like the backstory and the deeper understanding as to why stores carry certain things, why they only have limited amounts. And, it's so much deeper than, oh, the brand sent me these. No, it's you guys are going through and picking out which ones, and knowing your buyers and knowing what sizes you need to have in inventory, based on your clientele. It's like, it's kind of interesting from a business perspective.
Yeah, scientific. I think the one other thing that I wanted to share, Megan, is I had a woman last week who she is a road runner, and she runs in this shoe called the Asics Kayano. Kayano has been in Asics' line for 32 years now. They don't really change the fit of the shoe, but they've changed the DNA. They've made it a lot more soft and squishy, kind of more Hoka-like. But she loved the Kayano from 4 years ago. And ever since they changed it, she can't wear it anymore. She's tried each year, new model, still doesn't work. So she ended up finding 4 pairs on eBay. And keep in mind that shoe was 4 years old, but it was also sitting in a warehouse for a year before that. She got them, and I was like, "Hey, do what you got to do. I mean, see what happens." But I didn't want to say to her, "I have a sneaky suspicion that you're going to run in that shoe, and it's probably going to be hard as a rock." And inevitably, her first pair that she took out, her knees and back were killing her because that foam, it just kind of hardens, it dries out. It's ethyl vinyl acetate, and if you leave your car in the garage for 4 years, I'm sorry, your tires aren't going to perform the same way. So, all that air and foam and urethane and squishy stuff, just if you're not using it, it has no pliability to it. So don't make that mistake. Don't get so in bed with an old model that you're going to chase the internet all over for a shoe that's been sitting in a warehouse for 5 years. It's just not going to play very well.
Yeah, I think I had admitted to you the last time we talked that that's what I did. I needed a pair stat,
Right.
and we had moved on. I think we had moved on to a new model, and I was desperate for the old one, and I bought a pair, maybe even off of Amazon, and I didn't, because it was so close to the transition from one to the other. This particular shoe worked fine, but 4 years, that to me seems a little over the top. And even, I wouldn't do it now, mostly based on your recommendation, just because, again, now knowing some of the behind the scenes stuff, it's not like that shoe has been kept in the optimal conditions. It's in some hot warehouse somewhere, and just, the moisture is just leaching straight out of that foam in that shoe, so it's just getting drier by the millisecond. So
And we had some track spikes that, the track and field athletes for sprinting and distance on the track. And they were like 2 seasons old, and, they're $45. They're super lightweight. One of the kiddos from the middle school bought a pair last spring and was just going around the corner of a 400, and the whole upper came right off the plate. And that was that had been in my back room for a year. We gave him a great deal on it, but the glue had just dried out, and his whole foot came off the spike plate, and that's not good. So yeah, there's things to keep in mind. Like, we're dealing with a couple of, I won't mention the company, but they're not an ultra running company, more of a hiking company. But I've had to send 100 pairs of shoes back in the last calendar year because the outsole, is delaminating on every single pair that went out our door. We thought it was maybe just a bad run of glue, but come to find out, a lot of brands are using more sustainable glues, water-based glues, and they're just not holding very well. So until they get that fixed, I'm not going to sell them. I just can't handle this bandwidth of sending 100 pairs of shoes back to a brand. But
that's crazy.
yeah. So, but there is something to be said. And I think that the one thing that I will share is, I'm really a little bit disappointed in footwear in the industry, because, when you are done running in your trail running shoes and it's time to get a new pair, they're essentially disposable at this point. And yes, there's a lot of really cool programs where you can send like Soles for Souls. We have a bin out in front of our store called EcoSmith, where we'll send used or gently used shoes to developing countries where people bring them to open markets and sell them for $1. And you've got these like micro businesses that are happening, but then people who've never had a pair of shoes are going to be, well served with something like this. And obviously they're, it might be their first shoe and it'd be a dirt situation. But I think the problem that I struggle with is, if you don't repurpose those shoes in some sort of fashion and they hit a landfill, that foam takes 1,000 years to go away. And it's just really disheartening that lots of foam now is being made out of what I call thermoplastic polyurethane, TPU. And it's essentially a plastic that won't go away. The uppers will. And, once they're in a non-oxygenated state, those uppers will go away. But I'm kind of geeking out right now. I just wish more companies would find more sustainable foams that would biodegrade quicker. And Brooks is one of them that has done that. We're seeing some sugarcane foams being used now, which is kind of neat. But I just wish more brands would talk about that effort, because, there's lots of companies talking about, well, we have 50% recycled uppers and recycled shoelaces. And that's a really hard thing to do when you're selling millions of pairs of shoes across the globe, to have recycling programs for laces and uppers. But
yeah,
I think it's not the uppers that I'm concerned about. It's that foam. And it's just, there's got to be a better way to repurpose this stuff. So if anybody out there has got a great idea, like, let's make like rubber mulch, or,
well, don't they repurpose some of it for like playgrounds and stuff like that too, where they like, or tracks? Maybe I'm making that up, like school
Nike
tracks.
Does. They have a regrind program, which is cool, but I've heard very little about that lately, and I hope they get it back off the ground. Because
that's always been my thing too, is like, what do we do with all these shoes?
30 million tons of landfill waste last year with just footwear. So, yeah.
I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot.
So, yeah, I would encourage people before you just throw your shoes away, look to see if you can repurpose them somehow.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ted, any last things that you want to let the listeners know about? Anything cool that we should know, or something that we missed out on talking about?
Oh gosh, well, I would say I'm so grateful that you always have me on this show, and I love how far your show reaches. I've got people from all over the country that email me, which is super cool. And you know what? I love to educate and just talk to people. And my store number 603-357-8337. You can call me anytime, and I'll geek out with you. I love educating people, and you don't have to buy your shoes from me. I want to make sure that people are happy and healthy and not worrying about their feet when they're out running. It's the last thing you should be worrying about, right? Worrying about your breathing more than your feet.
So true. And what you're eating and the stretching that you're doing and all that other stuff. Yeah, I feel that same way, that like if we sort of touched on this before I hit record, but like if you can find a shoe that works for you, it makes your whole running experience so much better. I mean, I've seen people have shoes that they thought they fit, that their feet end up looking like hamburger meat afterwards because they're just so chewed up. They get blisters. They've got, all sorts of issues. Their toes are rubbing right up against the end of the shoe. They're, stubbing their toes, losing toenails, the whole nine yards. And I consider myself really lucky because I have had you in my backyard to be able to go to. And people are always amazed when I say, like, I don't lose toenails. Like, that's not like a thing for me. They're like, how is that possible? And I said, I don't know. I just have really good fitting shoes that are the right size. I've got, some lubrication on my feet. Like, it has made my running and ultra running experience that much better because I'm not constantly in pain from having ill-fitting shoes. So yeah. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you too. And I think the one thing that I want to make sure that people hear before we go is that the running industry has had these silos for years, right? If you have a low arch or a pronated foot where your arch collapses, then you need a stability shoe. And if you have a high arch, you need a neutral shoe. And if you have totally flat feet, you need motion control. These silos, running stores look at your arch height, then they go grab a shoe and dictate the shoe based on your arch height. Those days are over. Those silos are over, and there's no data that says pronation causes injury. So pronation is that load of when the foot hits the ground and your ankle kind of loads in and comes back up, it springs down. That's a natural shock absorption phenomenon that the foot does. 26 bones in that foot just loading and unloading. So, I think it's really important not to get caught up in silos. You don't need a stability shoe if you're running in the woods. In fact, many brands aren't even making stability shoes for trail shoes anymore. I actually don't even know if there's one that exists. And what a stability shoe is that has a harder piece of foam on the inside to prevent that foam from collapsing. Much more relevant for road running and lots of repetitive road impact forces. But really, there's a lot less of that mindset happening anymore. And let your feet naturally do what they were designed to do. Like intrinsically strengthen those muscles in your feet. So if you have a shoe that's a brick and it's like a cast, you may as well be running in a ski boot. You know what I mean? Your foot's not working. So keep that in mind. And really, it's not for everybody, but you know what? Work your way into it. And Megan, of all people that can speak that language, it's you. So
yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of those things. It's like the hill that I will die on is like free your feet, get them to do their job, move those toes around, scrunch some towels, do all the things that will help to make your feet healthier outside of the shoe. And then when you put the shoe on, it's almost like you're leveling up because now the two things work together and one is not fighting the other, so to speak. So
I was reading a story from a podiatrist in Colorado early February because we were seeing so many seniors slipping and falling on the ice around here because we had a pretty legit winter, right? And his story was wild that 50% of falls with senior citizens and elderly people can be prevented with strengthening their toes. Toe strengthening has nothing to do with, canes and stability devices, and it's just toe strengthening. So that should be in the top of all of our minds.
100%. Quick side story. I teach a mobility for seniors class here in Peterborough at the gym. Nice. And one of the things that we do is we do a lot of balance. But we have worked a lot on specifically big toe dorsiflexion and being able to articulate their toes. And they always give me a hard time about it because, it's this catch-22. I have terrible balance. I don't want to work on my balance, but I have terrible balance, but I don't want to work on my balance. And we have been incorporating that like in little bits and pieces. And it is so cool to see them actually walk and not shuffle, like shuffle their, like slide their feet over the floor instead of actually
Awesome.
rolling off their heel to toe. And just to see them be able to actually stand on one leg and balance, with shoes on or with shoes off, right? And that is the one thing. And they think that they're like, oh, my balance is so terrible. And they equate it to some other structure. And I'm like, okay, great. But we're actually going to start with the feet and we're going to work on, I make them like manipulate their toes individually, push, pull, separate. They always give me these dirty looks. I'm like, I promise your feet will feel amazing at the end. Just, go with me. And every single time they're like, oh my God, that was so amazing. Thank you for making me do that. My feet feel amazing first and foremost, because as you know, many seniors, they've got like super sensitive toes. Their feet are kind of just locked in place. They don't have a lot of movement or range of motion. And it's just been really cool. So I'm always using that story to tell other people, like, I know you don't maybe like care so much about how your big toe flexes, but I guarantee you will in about 35 or 40 years. So like, let's work on it right now.
Workshop you did at our store like a couple years ago when you had us put our fingers in between our toes.
Same stuff. That's the same stuff I make that older people do too.
My toes were sore for like 3 days because I don't do that enough. And what a difference it makes. You can actually see space between your toes again.
Yep.
So yeah, I love that. That being said, we didn't really talk about socks, but socks matter too. And I'm a big fan of those 5-toe socks.
Are you really?
Yep. Those Injinji socks are really great. Especially if people are prone to blisters, and some people, their skin is just more prone to it, right? But those 5-toe socks are pretty cool if you've never seen them. And it also adds some proprioception too. So
yeah. For me, it's too much volume, like between my toes for some reason. Maybe I just haven't gotten the right pair. The pairs that I've gotten have just been too thick. But for me, and for some people too, it's a sensory thing. I've talked to a number of people who are like, I can't do that. I can't have fabric between each of my toes. But I would agree, like if you're someone who has a lot of blisters and especially in between your toes, that's a really good one to like separate them out so that they're not rubbing up against one another and causing those hot spots and friction points.
Well, and I can't imagine anybody listening to this or anybody who's running ultras is ever even going to think about running in cotton socks, but
you would be surprised. You would be surprised. I have gotten many messages from people who are like, oh my God, I changed my socks. I was running in cotton and now I'm running in, some mixed fiber, maybe smart wools or whatever. And it has been a game changer. You would be surprised. I was surprised.
Wild. Well, merino wool is nature's miracle fiber. You can get it in super thin socks, and they are cool in the hot weather and warm in the cold weather. So merino wool, you guys, it's the way to go.
Yes. You heard it here first, guys. No more cotton. No more cotton socks.
Cotton is rotten. Cotton kills.
Yes. Yes. And on all levels, whether you're wearing it on your body or whether you're wearing it on your feet, shorts or shirt, or on your feet, on your toes.
I don't care.
Thank you so much, Ted, for coming to hang out. I really appreciate it. And
thanks, you guys.
Maybe we shouldn't wait 3 years to do another.
Yeah, I love it. And
another episode.
I'll touch you when I talk to Ultra today and let you know what happens with the new one. Yeah.
Yes, please do. Otherwise, you and me are going to spend some quality time together looking at other shoes because I have reached the point of either Ultra needs to go back to the trending towards the 5, or I need to move on to something else. So we'll see.
Well, we'll do it. We'll have fun.
Excellent.
All right.
Thanks, Ted.
You, Megan. Thank you.